Welcome to the podcast, Eric. It's great to have you on. Do you mind giving us a quick background on yourself and also what you guys do at IPscape?
Sure thing. My name's Eric Parker. I'm from IPscape. We're a cloud CCaaS company, CCaaS being contact center as a service. Uh, the My background, I started off actually in financial services before moving to a software product company. So I worked in insurance and finance. My education is also finance. And then I just, was working in the contact center type environment and just kind of drifted over towards technology over a number of years. And I've worked for a number of software companies now and been at IPscape for about 8 years. And currently the technology director, so I run the R&D team as well as the product team. So essentially the whole sort of product visioning, build, and development engine is what I'm doing. So that's
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. So, in terms of what IPscape is doing at the moment, obviously we talked before the podcast about Agentic AI, what you're building. Currently, what does IPscape do? What's the problem that solves? And then we'll also go into, what the future looks like with Agentic AI in integrating that into the product.
Yeah, great. So, look, the core of it is it's all about sort of, we use the term often customer experience orchestration, but basically you use our software. If you're a business, you use our software to talk to your customers, whether that be via voice or digital channels, social media, messaging, SMS, email, whatever the case may be, web chat on your website. And the sort of agentic AI use cases are all around kind of that AI layer and that increasing amount of self-serve and automation that is happening in the customer engagement space. So, I think nowadays you go to any kind of product type website, you more or less expect there's going to be a chatbot you can talk to. And that's great because it never sleeps. It's always there. You can go on at 2 a.m. in the morning. You don't get told it's closed and all of this. So but that's a very sort of traditional, just informational type service. It's sort of more what we'd call query deflection. So you kind of deflecting more basic queries. It's now advancing really quickly into more query and actual process fulfillment. And so we're looking at ways that our users can adopt to these technologies in a way that is a bit more incremental, so that at the moment you might be running your customer engagement team with a team of people, but that there's going to be more and more contacts coming. Hopefully your business is growing. To handle that volume, you might use AI to help facilitate that growth and get a lot more out of the people that you have and do more with less. And on top of that, obviously bigger, more established organizations also would see it as a cost saving opportunity, and also just fulfilling the experiences that customers are expecting. Most people have had AI of some sort on their mobile phone forever, and it's kind of an interesting. I think the whole industry is, or the whole technology vertical of AI is interesting in that sort of retail users have been kind of leading, and industry and enterprise has been a bit slower to adopt it for various reasons that we could get to. But it's I think for that reason, there's an imperative for that touch point with your customers to include the benefits of this technology.
Amazing, amazing. So, there's a lot of different aspects we could go into there, but in terms of agentic AI and where you see it heading, I guess for your company IPscape and I guess what you're building at the moment, where do you see the next 3 to 6 months going for agentic AI within the contact center software space?
Yeah. So in the immediate term, there's we're definitely all the competitors I'm aware of are all building agentic AI functionality. We're going to be shipping agentic AI functionality very, very soon. And this is all about bridging the gap between more of a FAQ type, even if it's very conversational and human-like, if using an LLM, say, perhaps, um, the that kind of chat GPT experience, but it doesn't actually reach out and touch the real world. And so agentic AI is all about extending that experience to actually fulfill on a task or even independently take an action. So imagine it's not just, the chat experience is more text in, text out, and it just kind of predicts what comes next. And that's very good if your use case is I have users who want to ask a question. It's great for that. But if you have an end customer who actually wants to change their order or wants to cancel a service or wants to complain about something, uh, that is a different kettle of fish, and your chat experience can tell them how to do that, who to contact, and so on, but it's not going to actually fulfill that. Agentic AI is adding those extra uh, that extra functionality to those flows where you might get a response back from the chat going, "I've changed your order, thanks," and it's um, it's actually touching the real world. That's where that kind of agentic metaphor comes from. Is it actually has agency and it's able to, first of all, decide whether an action is appropriate. So it might actually reach out to you and say, "Hey, is this order okay?" Uh, but by the same token, if you ask it to do something, it could actually reach out and do it. And that is sort of the key difference with agentic AI, and it's going to really bring everything to the next level. Uh, and the whole agentic framework is it's sort of looking at it is very much, if we get in, we could get into sort of the way software in general tends to build its metaphors up, but it's also starting to get into like, okay, thing processes that traditionally I would have a person do, sort of replicating that type of flow. So uh, then we also see a lot of opportunity for sort of net new use cases. So imagine you're a small business and you have a bunch of people who you've spoken to before. You want to reach out to them, you want to engage with them, but you just don't have the resources to do it. Maybe it's 100 calls that would be nice if they got done this month. You can't hire someone to do that, right? It's it's very difficult to say. You're either looking at outsourcing it, or maybe your AI can do it, and that's where we're starting to see a lot of new use cases emerging.
Nice, nice. And in terms of, I guess, how it compares to ChatGPT, products that are built on top of ChatGPT, sort of, they're like a wrapper. And so I guess in terms of what you're building, how is it different to that? And I guess when you're thinking about building the AI, how are you building it for the long term? Because it's rapidly changing. I guess what's your thought process behind that?
Yeah, that's something we take really seriously. The space is changing extremely rapidly, and not only that, but everyone obviously the OpenAI models, so GPT, currently GPT 4.0 is by far the most popular model, but there's actually lots of other models used for different purposes and in different contexts, and it's moving so fast that if you kind of tie yourself or hitch yourself to the OpenAI train, say, or to the GPT 4.0 train, you run a big risk of in 6 months' time, it's irrelevant. Uh, the other, speaking from a product company perspective, there's also a lot of vendor lock in and vendor risk around that, right? So any business should think about uh, how tightly am I tying myself to a particular AI provider, and what does that mean for my business? Can my business function if OpenAI is down? you know, and so having sort of a bit of modularity around that, and I think some sort of ability to, whether it's mixing and matching or just having the ability to plug in other models, is going to be beneficial for any application. The other thing I would say that is also incredibly important is it should not be just a thin wrapper over an LLM, because I think it's already been demonstrated. Companies that have done that very quickly, if they get any sort of success, they very quickly get rug pulled by the platforms themselves. So if you build an application and it is just a nice UI with on top of a big popular LLM, in a few months' time, they've released the same feature and now you don't have a business. So it's, that's, for product companies, that's something. And if I would say for anyone evaluating an AI product, you also should think about that as well. What value is this product actually adding beyond, the back end technology? Um, so really the trick is, and I think the products that will be successful are the ones that operationalize the technology in a specific context. And for us, that's customer experience, but you can imagine lots of different use cases, but operationalizing that well in a specific domain. And that's where our expertise is engaging with your customers and serving your customers in a way that's going to make them happy. And, that's all about, the time to resolution, times, might be a sales target. Uh, there's all sorts of metrics you might be trying to optimize your business for that sit under that customer experience umbrella. And that's what we're about. And so, what we're finding when we're building products is it's not just about exposing an LLM to the user. In fact, a lot of those use cases are kind of demo really nicely because they look impressive, but are kind of gimmicky in that they don't actually add much value. uh, what we're finding is that the real value is applying it to actually solving a real business problem. And, so we're kind of incrementally building up on the things that we've been releasing and getting into customers' hands, things that they wouldn't be able to do by themselves. And I think that's the key thing. And things that would be very, very difficult for, say, the platform to, they're not just going to replicate that tomorrow, right? Because there's a whole bunch of stuff around it, like, making the actual voice call and your public telephony services, integrating with your email services, queuing and prioritizing which interactions get served first. How are you distributing these interactions? How do you decide someone needs to be contacted? Even like this is like core customer experience problems that ChatGPT is not going to help you with. So that's,
Totally.
I'm picking on ChatGPT just because it's a popular one, but you
Totally.
get the idea. An LLM is not going to independently just change your business. So
Yeah. So agentic AI is that kind of step where it can do that, and you're obviously building to achieve that.
yeah,
Um,
and
so yeah.
what specifically, it's not the really high value use cases we find to actually execute them well. You can't do it just with like a large language model alone. You actually have a blend of models and different types of models in the back end that are orchestrated in a way to actually execute on that task. So that's really critical to get that right, and it's very domain specific. So uh, you know we'll do solutions that are targeted very specifically at a given industry, for example, because if you don't go deep on that, it's very difficult to adapt these things to your use case.
Interesting. So building specific, specifically for different industries, is that something that you're focused on rather than just yes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I already mentioned my background in financial services. Our home base is Australia. Financial services is something like 45% of the ASX. So that's where we're shipping first. So targeting the
Nice.
financial services sector.
Yep.
And they have a whole set of, concerns and considerations that are, uh, you know, they're not necessarily only specific to financial services, but financial services in Australia operationalize their management of these risks in a certain way. And being able to fit into that framework with your product is really, really important. And so,
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. So I guess in terms of the risks and opportunities, they're kind of touching on that. How do you, I guess, go about, minimizing the risks and I guess looking at opportunities as well in the same perspective? There's a lot you can build and a lot of things you can do, but I guess how do you go about, the risks and
Yeah.
opportunities?
So there's different strategies to take. So first of all, we're not building any first-party LLMs. Now, with that said, with the emergence of like DeepSeek, for example, there are now much cheaper ways to do that. But I mean, if you like GPT 4.0, I think it was, I think it's public record. The training round for that cost I think more than 50 million US dollars. So no business probably is going to be trying to do that themselves. Uh, but what we do is we architect our products in a way where we're able to manage vendor risks. And so a great example is with particularly with the large LLM models, and this goes equally for OpenAI as it does for Google Gemini and others. Uh, there are copyright cases going through the courts right now in America, in the US, and imagine one day, one of these companies that are taking OpenAI to court over a copyright claim because they've used their data to train their model. Imagine Disney took them to court, because they found that there's Disney, materials in OpenAI's training set. It, the court could just rule they get injunctive relief. You have to stop the behavior that's breaching. So they get an injunctive relief ruling, and then now OpenAI is down, or some version of it is down for a certain amount of time. So making sure that we're able to easily and portably substitute large, equivalent technologies, large language models, whether it be OpenAI, Gemini, the big providers, as well as having options for our own hosted things. So, for example, if you want to, a lot of the open models you can host yourself, like Llama from Meta, and there's a bunch of others. Anyone who's interested in running AI locally, highly recommend olama.com. So you can go on there and you can actually download Meta's Llama model and run it locally on your laptop or your computer. Lots of fun. So but I think that is one way we manage around it. Second is making sure that we provide the facility for pluggability of customized models. So that's back to the sort of specific domain expertise. You've got the industry level, but then there's the individual business level. And because we've even seen differences from business to business in how certain risk and compliance matters are handled. And if your risk model isn't able to adapt to that, then you're out of luck. You might find that it's just not suitable. So being able to plug in different models, perhaps even a model that's been trained on the customer's own business data, is a huge advantage. The most basic example of that is for transcription, right? We'll customize the transcription model for the customer so that it recognizes your branding and your acronyms and all of these things. And that's a very simple use case, but the same goes for if you want the LLM to respond in a certain way to certain questions. You need to have that training set there so that it speaks with your voice. And so that's incredibly important. Finally, I guess, is continual exploration and research on how these technologies are deployed and how they're delivered to customers. So at the moment, the easiest way to get access to a large language model is you go to Azure or AWS or Google Cloud and you pay them for your tokens, right? You pay them per token, per 1,000 tokens or million tokens or whatever it is. But those models are becoming exponentially larger and exponentially more expensive. And it's, I personally feel the hyperscalers with this are kind of making hay while the sun shines. The way I see this going is there's going to be a lot, it's likely to shift more towards on-device deployments, and particularly if you can run something on device but deliver it through the web, that's going to be very, very compelling. And so if you can get, there are these sort of mini versions of large language models that already are shipped to IoT and to your phone and these sorts of things. But we do a web application, it's SaaS, so I'm exploring things like compile an AI model to like WebAssembly or something and ship that into the browser, and then being able to run that in the browser app on your local, but it's actually doing the inferencing on your local hardware. That has implications for data security, making sure that it stays on your device, as well as the actual costs of running the service. If it's running on the user's computer, I don't have to pay a cloud provider, and so uh, that's going to be very compelling, and it means that the product can be much more competitive. Um, but that is sort of more an emerging space. And for example, you probably don't want to log into the app and then wait 5 minutes for something to download an AI model to your computer. So it's something that we just need to stay on the edge of and continue to test and learn with. Our first iterations, or our first products that we're going to be shipping, are going to be using the cloud AIs. It's going to be using Azure OpenAI, in fact, so that we can. Reason we chose them is because we can host that onshore in Australia, and particularly for our Australian customers who require that data residency, and we just kind of. The data residency and it for it to be processed onshore, and that allows us to deploy it inside of our application boundary, uh, which ticks that box, uh, but also gives us control. And as of this recording, the terms of service state also that if you're deployed in that fashion and you're using that, your data will not be used to like retrain the model and things like that, as opposed to the public API that anyone can just sign up to. Um,
Makes sense. It's exciting.
which,
It's exciting.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's I feel like you know it brings to mind another risk, which is those are the terms of service. Those can change with the stroke of a pen. So that's, we'll remember when Zoom just changed their terms of service to say, now we're going to listen to all of your calls to train our AI and you can't opt out. So, the likes of Microsoft and AWS could do that next week. They say they won't, but you never know. It's
They could.
happened.
They could. In terms of, I guess, when it comes to educating, the market, agentic AI, the people that understand it really in that top 1%, there's only, maybe 1% of people that actually understand what it is and what it does. I guess for people that don't really understand it, what it does, or how they can integrate it into their business and day to day, I guess what would you say to those people, and what would you suggest them to be, I guess, looking at and also thinking about?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I would say from a perspective of adopting the technology would be don't wait. It's something that's here now, and your competitors are using it, and particularly new competitors and emerging competitors are growing up with this as part of their business. And so uh, you know the you need to be, but that doesn't mean you need to go all in immediately, right? It is a very quickly changing space. So what you want to do is, and what I would always recommend, is to think bigger but start smaller. And so visioning what the future of interactions with your customers might look like is very important. And then do like a small test or a small scale POC, and do it with a partner that you trust. It's because most businesses are unlikely to have, as you said, all of the skills and resources in house to be able to execute on something like this. Uh, and so, of course, if your use case is customer experience, come to us. But if it's not, if it's something else, find a specialist in your domain space who knows, because who has the AI capability but knows your business space really, really well. Because that's where there's a lot of tools on the market that are trying to be everything to everyone, and you're just going to struggle if you're trying to do it yourself that way. Um, and also just making sure that you apply all the same scrutiny that you apply to other technology vendors. So, security, data sovereignty, uh, and making sure that there's adequate testing around what the outputs actually are. The LLM part of the technology is obviously non-deterministic. So making sure that you do have that deterministic logic at the point where your AI actually does something and executes on a process, that's something that you currently trust a human to do. And humans also make mistakes. But the last thing you want is your AI to make lots of mistakes. Certainly not more than a person, hopefully. But if it doesn't make a mistake, now you have to sort out who's responsible for that mistake. What's your process for resolving it? So there's considerations that you're going to have to work through, and new processes that you're going to need to implement. And I think that one of the main thing that I would say to look for in an AI, in an agentic AI product, or in an agentic AI solution, whether you're building it yourself or working with someone like us, is make sure that observability and monitoring is for the business is a first class citizen. It's all well and good to for IT to be getting logs and having all your security and things all passing, but if your business people can't see what's going on, you've lost control of the process. And so that's where we even see there's this new, in product development, you have a concept of a user persona, and it might be manager, salesperson, service agent, but we see this a new persona now. It's the AI orchestrator. So, and we're thinking about what does this person have on their screen? Imagine in the future you have a mostly AI driven customer experience function. There's still a user of our product who's sitting there and observing what's going on. What am I actually looking at on my screen? If there's 100 phone calls going with AIs, how do I see those? How do I pick where there's a call that might be going wrong? And how do I intervene at the right time? And I think that is something that has been not done very well, really, by any of the products on the market. And they're very good at sort of the analytics space is like very mature. So after things have happened, you can typically see what's been going on. But this needs to be real time, and you need to be able to intervene. The think about the corollary to, like, let's say I have a contact center, people are sitting there with headsets on. If I'm managing the contact center, I can just walk past and hear someone say the wrong thing. If it's all I can't hear it with my ears. So how do I see it on my screen? So I hope that makes sense. It's
It does. It does. Interesting. So the AI orchestrator, it's an interesting one because I feel like there's going to be companies where they're hiring people just to oversee their AI system.
Yeah. And well, that's just what we call the user persona. I don't know what the actual job titles of these people will end up being, but the critical thing is they're a business person. They're not an IT person. They're the person, they're in the group, in the team that's accountable for the customer experience results. And so if you can't just leave that to IT because they have different incentives, different concerns, a different problem space, right? And it's like if we start to ask them to monitor the contact center, like it will fail. And the business people need that line of sight. Yeah, absolutely. So they can get the website first, ipscape.com. They're free to contact me directly on email if they want. I'm at eric.parker@ipscape.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Thank you, Alex.